Well, it has been an incredibly exciting week with the Four Nations tournament, and my co-host Dave Pagnotta is in Boston getting ready for that final game as teams head back to the ice and start to practice. Of course, Finland and Sweden already eliminated, so those guys heading back to their respective teams. But we are slowly getting closer to that March 7th trade deadline, so we're going to break it all down here on the latest on the fourth period presented by CCM Hockey. I'm your host, Kate Pedersen. And Dave, thank you so much for joining me here. We are still talking Four Nations because there's
Yeah.
one big game left to go. But let's jump back as the trade chatter starts to pick up again. Heading into the tournament, and in the first week of the tournament, there was a lot of chatter around the St. Louis Blues. Are they going to make a move here before that trade deadline, which is only 17 days away? We talked about Pavel Buchnevich and Schenn Kyrou, but I think the biggest chatter there was that Brayden Schenn could be on the move. What can you tell us there about the validity of that and what we should be talking about?
Yeah, honestly, Kate, I think all three of those guys are out there right now. And yeah, there was that report that suggested or that correctly reported that Brayden Schenn is out there and available. And that really kind of spiraled things in St. Louis. And then that chatter, as you said, it really had a trickle effect throughout the first week in Montreal of this Four Nations tournament. A lot of people were talking about what St. Louis could possibly do. We know that Vegas is a team that's never afraid to make a bold move ahead of the deadline. And they have been linked to Brayden Schenn. He's got no trade protection. He will have a big say in where he ends up. But it does sound like Vegas is looking to make another type of splash ahead of the deadline. They have cap space. Obviously, Shea Theodore is out. We had heard the initial prognosis was 6 to 8 weeks, which would take them right towards the end of the season. So we'll see kind of where that goes. But he's on their radar and a few other teams as well. But also Buchnevich, his new extension kicks in July 1. Schenn Kyrou's got his big deal as well. These would be significant type of moves that St. Louis tried to pull off. And we know Doug Armstrong, their GM right now, yeah, he's not afraid to make the big deals.
Well, another team that's been fairly active, especially with these rumors, is Seattle. Could Jamie Alexiak be on the move? We talked about that earlier in the season. What about Oliver Bjorkstrand? What do we think they're doing? Are we going to see the kind of action we sort of anticipate at this point?
Yeah, Seattle, there's a lot of noise around the Kraken right now, and that isn't often the case because they like to keep a big lid on things. But there are so many players that they're listening on right now that more word is starting to really come out. And you mentioned Bjorkstrand. Brandon Tanev, who's a pending unrestricted free agent, there is a high expectation that he will be traded between now and the March 7th trade deadline. He's got a $3.5 million cap hit. Another player, you mentioned Alexiak, but another player that's also out there, Jared McCann. And McCann's got 2 more years left on his contract. He's got a 10-team no-trade list. But there is a lot of noise surrounding him and almost at the same level of Tanev that there is an expectation that he could be moved by the deadline. I don't know if I'd go that far necessarily, but there is a very good chance based on chatter around the league and talking to people around the league that McCann could be on the move. Both him and Tanev may be the likeliest suspects to go. Yanni Gourde is battling injury. He's a pending unrestricted free agent as well. He's out there. They've got a lot of other assets that they're willing to listen on. Seattle could be a very busy club between now and March 7th.
Okay, let's take a look at Buffalo because we know that they're looking to retool for next season. So this next 17 days is just a chance for them to get a head start on what they're going to do over the summer. What do you think that Buffalo is looking at doing right now? Because we've talked about Dylan Cousins, but it seems that chatter's died down a little bit. Maybe Alex Tuch. Like, what do you think Buffalo's going to do? And are they going to take this and get going?
They'd like to. Kevin Adams would like to get a head start on things going into the summer and leading into next season. They've got their mindset is big and focused towards the playoffs for next season. Obviously, everything's written on the wall right now for this year, but they want to get a head start on things. And that's why we've heard Cousins so often this season. He is available, but they want to make a big hockey type move involving any of their young studs. Now, there are a lot of teams that are calling or have called and inquired about Alex Tuch. My understanding is he's not untouchable, but he's close. Him, Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, I mean, those two guys not on the market. Alex Tuch is as close to that as they can get. Unless they're making a significant hockey trade and almost an upgrade, I don't see Alex Tuch getting moved ahead of the deadline. They're not going to move him for futures. Buffalo doesn't want draft picks and young prospects. They want NHL caliber studs now if they're going to move any of theirs. So you're probably going to hear Tuch a little bit more. They're probably 30, 31 teams that would love to get their hands on this guy. But unless they're blown out of the water, Tuch isn't going anywhere. And we're going to continue to hear Cousins. We'll continue to hear Boehm, Byram, even Owen Power. But unless we're talking about talent for talent type swaps, Buffalo's going to kind of hang tight, but they are getting a head start and have continued that this season.
All right. Well, one more thing I want to ask you about Carolina, Mikko Rantanen. Obviously, huge deal to get him, but it's kind of cooled down in terms of us hearing that there is a long-term future. And we do know that it's not going to be about the money. So
Yeah.
what's going on there? Are they having trouble kind of figuring out the waters with signing him long-term?
It certainly sounds in the chatter over the last few days around Four Nations. There's a lot of talk surrounding his future and it not likely being in Raleigh. Now, things can certainly change, and this is a lot of speculative talk. But it is important to note, and you mentioned it, it is important to note that money won't be the factor here. Carolina is willing to give him the big bucks that he's looking for in that $14 million range. So that's not an issue. It really is going to come down to Mikko Rantanen being comfortable staying there long term. And there are a lot of people around the league. There's a lot of chatter among teams that they're doubting that that's the case. Now, obviously, nothing is done until it's done. But if that does occur, if that's the notion that Carolina gets, they will explore the market on him to recoup the assets that they gave up to get him. No guarantee they pull the trigger on it, and no guarantee he doesn't sign. But a lot of the chatter right now that I can tell you around Four Nations has been that his future in Raleigh up in the air. So we'll keep tabs on that.
All right. Well, we've only got 17 days until the trade deadline. You're on the ground in Boston, and I said it to you when we were off air. What an exciting tournament this has
Yeah.
been. I know we're both Canadian. Do you have a prediction for Thursday night? Given that the U.S., they looked so good the other night, but they're pretty banged up right now.
They are. And the Kachuk brothers and Matthews will be playing. We know Charlie McAvoy is out. Quinn Hughes is coming to town. So we'll see what happens there. There was no indication as to whether or not he'll play, and the rules right now suggest he can't. So unless there's a tinkering, we'll see where that goes. Um, this is a tough one. I haven't made up my mind yet.
Okay.
I picked the U.S. before this tournament started to beat Canada in the final. I might lean in that direction still, but I'm not going to offer up my pick just yet.
Okay. You just glazed a classic workaround there. I love it. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Dave, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for watching. It's the latest here on the fourth period, presented by CCM Hockey.